to do this. Go from a news show. What do we do next? How about a kiddie show? No, that's still TV.
Circus.
A circus could do that. How about something really weird? An accounting office. And I'll have to work it all in to fit with accounting procedures. By the way, they asked me, again, we're short-handed here, right quick was to give a weather update because we found out they said that. Well, they said that, holy Jesus, that the weather there's going to be a reversal. They said the weather had definitely taken a change in the other direction. So I'm not sure. That's just what they told me to report. Well, we had a few items here, that the news team asked me to try and analyze. Several had, and I'd like to point out, since we've already been through this, several of these that were selected had the word somewhere in it, I know, made reference to the word religion. But all of you people are, I'm sure. You understand enough by now. Religion is no subject to be picked on. It is no field to be picked on in particular. It was, in a sense, from someone who can think, it was, in a sense, worthy of being ignored, since you people are from the West, and most of you are Jews and Christians, although some of you I know are members of the Moose Lodge. But at any rate, so we'll assume that all of you, looking to be of the Western civilized persuasion, that all of you have religions dating back at least 2,000 to 3,000 years, they say. The point was, if you could think what religion represented even then, if we assume, let's say, 0 BC, 0 AD was the beginning of religion, let's just say it. By then, by the next day, anybody who could think, religion was already outdated. But no worse, it's not we all know this by now, it's thinking or anything that we're reporting here on the news has nothing to do with an attack on religion. But the point is, religion as an institution, as a manifestation of the collective intellectual efforts of man, is the primo example. It includes education, it includes the arts, it includes everything that man does in one lump, which is what makes it such a desirable example. Not a target. And sometimes we do report news here that specifically says art or education, but religion covers it all. It is, assuming that you are not tied up with the myths of religion, that it institutionally, that is a collective effort of man, religion of any kind, anywhere, I don't care which one it is, it will at that time, in that place where it represents, will include a greater amount of the people's effort, intellectually, which is what all it is, than any other example. That's why it is such a good example. Not because it is worthy of disrespect or an attack, it's not. No more than anything else. It's just not. But the reason that it's brought up is, if you will now, in case I never tried to make it that clear, you should know it yourself, it is so inclusive, it is so wide range that it is the best example. But you got to remember, any time that we're saying religion around here, we're including everything cultural, artistic, educational, intellectual, that man does. That at any given time you can just say religion, and it doesn't matter which religion, because it's all the same. It just is the best, most widespread, the largest umbrella, the biggest, most inclusive net to capture what men were doing or are doing at any particular time in any particular place. Having said that, God, who said that? Oh. What in the hell happened to Puget Sound? Oh, that's the weather going the other way. Well, I guess let the jet stream suddenly turn on you and blow up your dress, and I bet, I won't make any cruder jokes having to do with certain extreme areas of the alimentary canal. Well, there were a whole bunch of items. I was going to try and wrap up some having to do that was included here in religion. That's why I gave it that preface. Well, let's see what happens. A man who will complain about being took is sure to get took again. I asked that we could just run through them. I don't know why you made me stop. It gets back to the everything inclusive also of men talking about their lives. Anytime you complain, with an ordinary person, of course, it's irrelevant, because that's part of what complaining is about, is to stay an ordinary person, to be a poser in your own hometown. And for those of you that do not in any way commemorate the death of Percy Mayfield, I don't know. But everybody is a poser in their own hometown. Therefore, to stay there, to stay where you are and stay stable, you must complain, what the hell am I doing in my own hometown? How come I can't get out of here? We're talking about here, we're not talking about Oakland. Why can't I get out of here? As long as you'll complain, I'll rephrase the news item. As long as a man will complain, he will always have something to complain about. Because all you've got to do is holler about, boy, I've been took. And another difference between this kind of good news show and those kind of phony real ones is that I can give you a personal guarantee. Not just me, but the whole news team, I'm sure, back me up. Where the hell they go? If you will complain about being took, you can count on it. You'll be took again. So all you got to do is just complain about it. Jesus, look what they did to me. I was a member of this church. I was a member of this political organization. I gave the best years of my life to this man or woman. And look what happened. Well, you can look if you want to, or if you're busy. Just wait until they come back around, and the guy will have been took again. All you got to do is complain, and you'll be took again. There are things that the body does that the mind will say embarrasses it. This is not so. That means this is not so. There are things that the mind does itself that embarrasses itself, but it's just trying to shift the blame. Those of you who are listening fast, and you've got to, that also has to do something with what is normally referred to as the all-encompassing small letter R of religion. Yes, it does. All right. Neurons continually complain about hormones. The mind continually complains about life, but what is its main basis with ordinary people? It's on the basis of behavior, always. What else is normal senses of morality? What is the main thrust of all religions? Even say, holler, well, over here's our school of religious theology, of philosophy. And you go over there, and what are they talking about? Behavior. That's all the ordinary have. So the mind is continually complaining and saying, I would be much better off were it not for some of the rather embarrassing things that my body does. Or if it was more philosophically bent, it might try not to be so specific individually and say, we would all be better off if it were not for certain of the uncouth, unsophisticated, embarrassing things that man's or our body does. That is not so. Now, everyone could say that there are things that are embarrassing that the body does that you shouldn't do in public. But it's not embarrassing until you say it. How come you can't get your dog to ever look ashamed if he burps? It's not possible. And it's not because he's dumb. Unless you're ordinary, and then, of course, you can think your dog's dumb. You can think trees are dumb, and it's your privilege. The mind says that things embarrasses it, but what it is talking about, because the body itself, if we're going to draw that line again, going right through, where Kansas meets Nebraska, where the limbic system meets the cortex. If we drew that line, it is only up here, it's only above the line that the mind can be embarrassed. It's only embarrassed about itself, but it can't say that. It cannot. There's no way that the mind, any more than the mind can say, well, it's ordinary level. The man can say, well, I will study myself. That's why it is such a popular, well-remembered maxim that the unexamined life is not worth living. Or that God send down the message, know thyself. Everybody goes, Hear, hear, yes, yes. I'll spend my life attempting to do so. Well, you remember there was a man who got accused of wasting his life in the study of beavers. The man was no fool, though. He retorted by saying, well, had it not been that, I would have wasted my life on something else. So anyone who wants to know themselves at the ordinary level, sail away. It's either that or you can take up drinking or something even more expensive. The mind cannot conceive of it being the source of, this New Time said, embarrassment. How about if we extend that to just say all forms of complaints? Except the mind at the ordinary level would immediately deny that. The mind of an ordinary person, a sane person, will say that's not true. The mind would say the most horrible things that can happen to a person is not here. Such as if you ask an ordinary person, what's the most horrible thing that can happen? And what will most people say? Tax audit. No, they're wrong. That was a joke. Somebody paid me to say that. An ordinary mind would say that the worst thing that can happen is what? To die. Try and discuss that with a beaver or a dog and say, what's the worst thing that can happen? Do you realize you're going to die? And just watch the animal shiver. As the realization sinks in, which of course it won't. That is not the most horrible thing. But what's the mind going to say? Where can it look to? All it can look to is that which is visible, that which is blatant, that which is obvious, as a tax auditor hiding in your bushes. The truth is, here it is, we've got to get past this one. Some of you can either hear it or not. The worst thing, the most embarrassing thing, but the worst thing can happen to the human mind is the things that the human mind does. The body's not afraid of dying. They don't even know what it is. You got to tell it. And your body still, if we're going to play the game of dividing it up, which if you get good at, you can't do it. I keep saying it can't be done. It's just a figure of speech. Your mama. You can find out that your body, you can say, hey, you know all about death. Well, sure, I grew up around ordinary people, your body says, if it could talk, which it can. And you say, well, what do you think about death? And it goes, well, that looks to be bad news. Well, how do you know that? Well, hell, everybody says so. If you got an answer, if your body would say, well, if you're so dumb to have to ask, all right, because everybody says so. Everybody in the world. Why? You saying not? And your brain will say, well, not me. I'm not going to deny it. But it's not. The worst thing that can happen to the mind is the things that the mind does to itself. But it cannot even see it, much less make any sense out of it. Because even the statement itself, although grammatically I guess will fly, it doesn't make any sense to say, well, the things the mind does are the things that embarrasses the mind the most. That it is only the things that the mind does that upset the mind. It's not the body. And you tell your mind that, and the sentence again, I assume, well, let's assume, that makes rhetorical sense, grammatical sense, but your mind goes, what in the hell does that mean? I don't have complaints with my mind. Oh, sure, I'm not as smart as I want to be, and sometimes I get a little depressed. But that kind of stuff you can get over. That's why God made Valium. But the real things, would say an ordinary sane mind, the real things are what goes on with the body, such as death. And it's not true. Can't be proven. And even if it could, I wouldn't try to prove it. That's not it. The things that embarrass the mind, the things that annoy the mind, are the things of the mind. But the mind's got to lay the blame off. Thus, all religious people, back to that, all sane people, all moral people, are most ashamed of what? Most concerned about what? What is civilization? What is morality? Behavior. They'll tell you. Well, I don't care whether you agree with our laws, or our morality, our culture here, sir, but you're here with us. Do as we do. I don't agree with it. Well, we're tired of talking to you. We don't care whether you agree with it or not. Just do it. Just act right. Jesus. Is that civilized or not? Is that education or not? Is that being religious or not? Well, sure, says a priest, a rabbi, anybody. In the institution of religion with a small r, that full umbrella, They will all say, well, wait a minute, we can't do as we teach. But that's not the point. Act right. And the mind says, yes. If just my body would act right, if I would just behave, if I would just not be sitting in church, and now that they've let females take over the pulpit, if I would just not sit there and get erotically aroused, and they ask us to snap and sing, and I'm embarrassed in these tight pants. It's just my old body. Is that civilization or not? It's only a real thinker that understands, wait a minute. What the hell am I spending my whole life being embarrassed about? Not that you should go around doing it, but you get the point. Why should I get embarrassed over the fact that, sometimes I burp, sometimes I stink? Anything the body can do. Why do I get embarrassed over that? Because the source of being embarrassed is not that. The source of being embarrassed is this saying that you're embarrassed. Now, if you'll get past embarrassed and consider it to be, let's say an M, like Memphis. Metaphor. That embarrassed is just how about even a symbol for everything that the mind complains about. Everything from sin, shortcomings, all complaints that a man has with himself. Now fill in that news item instead of things embarrassed, fill in embarrassed with anything you want to. All complaints that the mind has, which is all the complaints an ordinary man feels like he has personally. They all come down to behavior. They all come down to the mind complaining about the body. Boy, is this thing embarrassing. Boy, is this thing a pain in my ass. Boy, does this thing hold me back. That's just wonderful. You understand, they will not ask you to leave the party early. You can stick around until they close the last light in Eden. So you can stay right to then, because as long as you say, well, it's my old body. And everybody around you goes, how true. How true. We would all be saints. We would all be Einsteins. We would all be able to, in fact, jump off roofs and fly like birds were it not for what? And they all get together and say, our bodies. God, what an embarrassment. You understand? As long as that is what is driving a person's sense of propriety, a sense of what's possible, then understand this. You're always improprietous and nothing is possible. Because you're saying, wait a minute. I was born like I am by God and I don't like it. All right? Then you're ordinary. But once you get past the age, I don't know, 5, 6, 7 years old, and you still don't like it, who knows? You could grow up to be a priest. You're damn sure going to grow up to be an adult. And you're going to grow up to be embarrassed and upset and concerned. About what? The embarrassments that have nothing to do with the mind. My shortcomings are not my own, is what the mind says. And it looks here, it looks in the past, it looks somewhere, if not the distant past, then the more immediate past, like 20 years ago, my parents and all that. All right, well, the fact that men have made up everything they know is still so disturbing to many that there remains a very strong reader's market for so-called Holy Scripture, which is a variation. Thankfully, we only have a few minutes and I won't have to strain anyone's eggs. Mind trying to show that this is exactly what we're talking about just then. The mind knows in the same way that, and I say know, and you can translate that as well as anybody else. The mind knows that the body is not the problem. The mind knows that all of the complaints it has and directs and identifies as being originating in the body, they know it's not. The mind knows it's not so. The mind also knows, in a wider sense, that everything it does know, it and the collective, it knows. If you hold it down and torture it, I don't have to get nasty and make some of you sick, but if you hold down a man's mind and torture it, just like make it go just non-stop now, 20 hours to a Presbyterian church or something, and stay awake. That That not being available, a Republican convention. Worse yet, a conclave of young Republicans in suits and ties. Oh, boy, now I'm getting the willies. And most of them Presbyterians at that. The mind knows that everything it knows, and thus the collective, that is common conventional wisdom, everything that the mind knows, everything that man knows, the mind made up. It knows that. Well, in the same sense that the stomach knows what it is. It can't talk about it. The mind knows what it is. And it knows that everything it is invented, but it can't say it any more than the stomach can say, yes, I know I'm a stomach. The mind knowing that is then why there are such things as hero worship. Religion was maybe a big R. Holy Scripture was in this news item. That is the belief again that is quite reasonable. Anything other than it would be unreasonable, because this is reasonable that we have these Holy Scriptures everywhere. And from one view, if we were just a traveling smartass flying in from another planet and you were just stuck here overnight, from some other planet, somebody could look around and say, good God. I don't know whether they'd say that, but if you said, did you know there are people out now, millions of people right this minute, in places, and one person's dancing with an audience. One person's got an audience, and they're waving around some kind of book and hollering about what God wants people to do, which is simply the shortcomings of whoever's waving the book. And the creature, this visitor, could say, wait a minute. They believe that this book, that somebody wrote down these words, some man, yes, but that the man didn't actually write them, or some group of men, that some human didn't write this. Well, yeah, what they say is it was like an inspiration. You mean their mind, well, they won't say spirit sometimes, okay. But something inside them said, men should not have sex with women. All right, some man wrote that. Did anybody notice whether he was, maybe a hairdresser? Just or some man writes down, the God said that God does not like those who physically seem to be of no consequence. How much did the man weigh who wrote this? Well, he was rather portly. No one noticed anything. Well, he said that it came from the gods, that he was just a vessel. That he was just, that the words just came through. All right. The point is, because we don't have to just say a visitor from another planet, you know that the history is replete with local smart alecks that attack religion. So that's ridiculous. The point is, from the level of the mind, from the level playing field at the mind at which it starts, you don't have to be an atheist, you don't have to be anti-religion, just at the own level of the mind that wrote, the mind that acted as the vessel for the Upanishads, and the Old Testament, and the New Testament, and the Middle Age Testament. That same mind, if you say, wait a minute, these other humans wrote it, but they said they didn't actually write it. They said that God's, some force outside this closed system, made them write it. At that level, an impartial mind would go, right. So don't wait for some smart aleck traveler from another planet. Your own mind, with no hostility, no criticism. If you tried to turn that back, like that kind of map, you say, well, the weather is, here's what the mind does. Everybody goes, yeah, and it turns its head for a second, and you reverse the map of the United States. And just go ahead and of course today, since the God's talked to us, here's the way things are. The mind itself that bought this, the mind itself that was reporting the news to you, the mind itself that said, here's what the gods want, that same mind would turn around and go, what in the hell is this? It knows that something is specifically amiss. Trying to be decent. Left with the fact that the mind knows, back where we were, that everything it knows and everyone else. The mind knows that at that level at which it cannot talk, the same as the stomach. At that level, every mind on this planet knows that humans wrote everything. Anything that's ever been written, a human wrote. And they can say that, well, that came from somewhere else. There was another news item to point out that within everyone's mind is another mind. And within that mind is even a second mind. And within that mind is still another mind, but so what? What difference does it make? What'd you do with the first one? Yes, but we have many, many minds. Again, it is very efficient, to say the least. The mind's knowing that, it knows that there is no such thing as information mentally. There's no written information anywhere that came from anywhere but the human nervous system. It's just noise. But instead of it being, the sound of your stomach when you're hungry or when you've overate, it's the sound of the mind that says, verily, verily. And the guide steps forward and says, you're making embarrassing noises with your, whatever the guide. The human mind knows at the non-speakable level, that's not true. It came from somewhere. Some human wrote it. But humans knowing that, without being able to say it, that continues to support. The market never weakens. It goes up and down a little, but look around. You will not have any trouble finding a religious bookstore anywhere on this planet. And if you don't see a store, just pop in a dark alley, and the guy in the raincoat, if you don't want any dirty postcards, he'll have some Holy Scriptures. You can always find Holy Scripture, wherever you are, because the human mind knows that everything we know is made up. So, since I'm now too old to play doctor and nurse with that little girl next door, I'm not any longer 7, I'm 37. And so I'll play a new game. I'll pretend that those holy words, that those Holy Scriptures, finally, is one thing that all of us didn't make up. I'll pretend that. And you just hope that your mother or some other sane adult does not suddenly pop in and say, what are you children doing in here so quiet? Oh! We're just reading the Holy Scriptures and having church. Is the show completely over? One thing about putting off the heart of the sermon story is you never get around to it. I was trying to wrap it up. No matter how it's described, trying to be a better person, and in the news item it's in quotation marks, so it includes everything from the humanist, secular view to any religious view on this planet. A better person. Everybody wants to be a better person if they're sane. You don't have to be religious, but everybody would say, yes, I want to be a better person. No matter how it is described, trying to be a better person is one thing. It's trying to think more. But geez, how are you going to scare up a crowd with that? What kind of... Because for one thing, see, it says nothing about behavior. It says nothing about strange and rude noises of the body. Think more. Even Lutherans wouldn't go for that. And there was, since it's just us, I'll go ahead and use this one as a wrap-up because it's not in order, but only peckerheads stand around awaiting the return of Peckerman. That perhaps is the ultimate, if you can understand it, statement on the nature of religion. It is. Well, I didn't get on. What I was going to do, if this helps a little, see, I was going to do this. I was going to read page 99 and say, all right, here may be the all-inclusive, ultimate statement representing what religion is with a small r. You remember it? All education, culture, arts, that's what I mean by religion. And it would be, no matter what else it is, how else it is described, trying to be a better person is trying to think more. And then I was going to go, well, this may actually, the other one's all right, but this one may actually be the supreme, the zenith of a verbal statement of what religion is about. And that is, only peckerheads stand around awaiting the return of Peckerman. beyond dramatics and humor, I'll just tell you the truth, that is damn close to the ultimate statement.